Dank u, mevrouw de voorzitter. Ik baseer me op artikel 25.
Thank you, Madam President. Rule 25. On the 1st of March in Ghent, we narrowly avoided a disaster. Climate activists were engaging in very dangerous sabotage activities. They snipped cables and put explosives into hospital premises. The Belgian authorities said that it was radical action by climate activists who were trying to damage pipelines, and statements were made that this was legitimate, not a kind of climate terrorism. When we see people being targeted in this way, we should have an alarm setting off. We should wake up to this. We cannot be complacent, and we should stop giving such people a platform in this Parliament.
Olżata Gosiewska, 686. It's on. No, it's not. 686. Yeah. No.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, colleagues. 82 years ago, Volyn and East Galicia, we witnessed the so-called Volyn massacre that was conducted by Ukrainian nationalists who brutally murdered tens of thousands of Poles. Today we think about the victims. We commemorate the victims, not to spark hatred, but to seek reconciliation based on truth. I want to believe that the nation who's now experiencing the war, who's trying to find and identify its victims, will finally understand our need to find all the victims of those times. We want to commemorate them. It's our shared memory. It should be our shared commitment. We will always remember you.
I'll give the floor now to Fabio De Masi.
Frau Präsidentin, ich beziehe mich auf Artikel.
Thank you. Article 131 of our rules. Non-attached members were not given the right to speak in this very important debate regarding President von der Leyen. You must remember that we were elected by the citizens of Europe. Mrs. von der Leyen was never actually up for election. No direct.
Von der Leyen ins Amt gehoben hat. Man sagt also, mit rechten Stimmen darf man Frau von der Leyen wählen. Aber wenn dann von der rechten Seite des Hauses ein Misstrauensantrag kommt, dann wird plötzlich die Nase gerümpft. Und über diese Politik schütteln die Menschen vor dem Bildschirm den Kopf. Frau von der Leyen spricht von Rechtsstaatlichkeit und sie wurde verurteilt, wiederholt von europäischen Gerichten für den Bruch des europäischen Rechts. Sie hat heute kein Wort dazu gesagt, ob sie dem Parlament hier ihre Textnachrichten zur Verfügung stellen wird. Und auf dieselbe Art und Weise.
For instance, the text messages, making them available. And similarly, she is also organising the defence and armament of Europe. At the same time, she's trying to do that by bypassing Parliament. The European Parliament, you know, we're supposed to just be here to rubber stamp, to applaud. Shouldn't we be calling these matters into question? Thank you.
Nusa Nerudova.
Thank you. I'm falling, I have lost this fight. I live with honor. I love this country. I love its people. Build a better future for them. I live without hatred. These were the final words of Milada Horáková, a politician, a patriot, and a fearless defender of democracy. She was executed 75 years ago after a fake trial orchestrated by the communist regime in Czechoslovakia. Today we remember her not as a victim, but as a symbol of courage, integrity and resistance against tyranny. Milada Horáková sacrificed herself for the values that define Europe today. In Horáková's time, it was Stalin in the Kremlin. Today, it's Putin. But the goal remains unchanged, to crush independence and to break the spirit of free nations. We must never forget her sacrifice, today more than ever, and we must never stop defending what she stood for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. João Oliveira.
Obrigado, Presidente. Thank you very much, President. The European Parliament cannot remain silent faced with measures which attack freedoms and rights and guarantees that are fundamental to democracy. And there are efforts to try and influence the powers of members of this Parliament. You can see this situation in the Czech Republic, where there's an unacceptable campaign persecuting the Czech Communist Party. And they are trying to condition the activities of the Bohemian Moravian Communist Party. They are banning what they call the promotion of the communist movement, which can only be rejected by this House. We would like to express our solidarity with the communists and other Czech Democrats. And we call upon the authorities of the Czech Republic to respect democratic rights and freedoms.
Van den Berg. Okay. She doesn't seem to be here. Therefore, we start the next item.
The next item on the agenda is the report made by Francisco Assis as a reporter, Financial Activities of the European Investment Bank, that is the annual report for 2024. The first to speak it will be the reporter, Francisco Assis.
Thank you, President, Commissioner Albuquerque. Particularly nice to see a fellow Portuguese here. Colleagues, today we're discussing in this plenary a report drawn up over several months on the financial activities of the European Investment Bank in 2024. I'd like to highlight the constructive and open spirit with which all the shadow rapporteurs participated in the negotiations. The dialogue was always frank and honest. I believe we've ended up with a balanced report that is coherent and in line with the main objectives set out at the beginning of this process. As this is a report on the merits and shortcomings of the bank's past activity, it should also be a forward-looking exercise identifying the new challenges facing the European Union and finding new areas of action where the bank can play a relevant role. It is true that the EIB has been fully aligned with the EU's political priorities. However, it is also absolutely clear that given the enormous scale of the challenges ahead, we cannot tackle them simply by calling on the EIB to do what is the responsibility of public authorities, drastically increase public and private investment capacity in Europe. I'd like to address now some of the most relevant issues raised in the report. Firstly, the EIB's role in investment and promoting competitiveness. This investment deficit identified in the Draghi report amounts to 800 billion euros per year. All economists know that productive investment is a necessary condition for future economic growth. While we recognise the important role that the EIB has played in financing European priorities, it is also clear that the needs far exceed the bank's additional capacity. the EU must make the creation of investment instruments one of its top priorities. We also consider it essential for promoting investment and European competitiveness to continue advancing the Capital Markets Union and completing the Banking Union. In this report, we also call on Member States to seriously consider the need for an increase in the EIB's capital. It's crucial to preserve the bank's AAA rating, a key asset that is largely the result of its strong alignment with the EU's strategic priorities, starting with the European agenda for the transition to a green economy. I'd now like to talk specifically about the central role of the EIB as the EU's climate bank and to emphasise its alignment with the EU's sustainable finance framework, and particularly through the integration, where appropriate, of the taxonomy criteria, support for the energy transition through the financing of sustainable and clean technologies, and its active contribution to the efforts to decarbonise the European economy. The taxonomy criteria with future-looking, we have to keep this level of ambition, not only to continue transforming human activity and making it compatible with the planet's limits, but also it is this area that Europe can anchor its economic competitiveness. We recognise the EIB's pioneering role in the green bond market and the scale of its work in this area. It's the world's largest issuer of green bonds, a leadership position that must be maintained. The bank must also remain particularly committed to combating energy poverty, the need to strengthen preparedness for extreme weather events, and supporting those most affected by the green transition, which also means investing in the retraining of workers, a concern that also applies to the digital transition we must carry out. Security and defence and its financing. Doubling of investment from 2023 to 2024, which is expected to double again in 2025, reaching €2 billion. I believe there is broad consensus in this House that the impacts of the ongoing geopolitical changes require Europe to show greater leadership in this diplomatic and military actions. Europe must invest more in its defence and take its external action seriously, of which the Global Gateway Strategy is a key example. However, we believe that the EIB-supported investment must continue to meet the dual-use criterion, civil and military. There are several reasons for this. First, because the EIB's eligibility criteria and financial allocations in this area have been continuously updated, including in recent months, the Commission has introduced new instruments and sources of financing for defence under initiatives such as REARM and SAFE. And finally, because financing the purchase of arms and ammunition could have a negative impact on the bank's reputation and credit rating. In this regard, we would also like the EIB to clarify whether the decision not to set a ceiling for defence financing has any impact on other policy priorities. It's essential that it is clear in this House that additional investment in defence will not be at the expense of other areas of intervention. With regard to these other areas of intervention, I would like to mention that we consider it essential that the EIB continues to finance investment in social infrastructure. I'd like to highlight the EIB's contribution to increasing the supply of affordable and energy-efficient housing and welcome the €10 million investment plan for the next 2 years. However, the data provided by the bank itself points to much greater needs. We're talking about 1.5 million new homes and 5 million renovated homes per year, which means an annual investment volume of between 300 and 400 billion euro. It is clear, once again, that the bank can only play a complementary role, and public and private investment in the EU must be promoted. We also welcome the EIB's focus on cohesion policies, which are essential for correcting regional disparities and promoting social inclusion, and we welcome the bank's work in stimulating youth employment, access to vocational training, and encouraging innovation. Finally, I would like to stress the importance of dialogue and cooperation between this Parliament and the EIB. The growing importance of the EIB calls for greater democratic accountability. The S&D does not want to undermine the bank's autonomy. We respect and protect it. However, we believe it is essential to establish an interinstitutional agreement between Parliament and the EIB, something that this House has been calling for and which is once again included in this report. Thank you very much.
Rapporteur, the Vice President of the European Investment Bank is not yet arrived. Therefore, I will give the floor to Mrs. Albuquerque on behalf of the Commission. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Dear Chair, dear Rapporteur, caro Deputado Francisco Assis, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the European Parliament for the report and the opportunity to present the Commission's views today. We welcome the European Parliament's recommendation, especially those related to supporting the competitiveness agenda and advancing the Savings and Investments Union. The EIB Group has been our closest and most reliable partner throughout the years. This support is needed more than ever today, given the current geopolitical turmoil. Allow me to focus on 3 points in particular. First, with regard to the EIB's activities. We appreciate the recent increase in EIB Group's financing ceiling to an unprecedented €100 billion in 2025 and the launch of new programs to strengthen Europe's competitiveness, technological leadership and security. Additionally, the impact should drive the EIB's intervention in this additionality, and the impact should drive the EIB's intervention in these areas. I welcome the EIB's TechEU programme, which the Commission supports via InvestEU. This ambitious programme aims to increase venture capital investment and facilitate easier exits of venture funds, thereby providing much-needed support to innovation and areas of importance for our economic security. I encourage the EIB Group to work closely with the Commission to ensure synergies between the TechEU programme and the Commission's Startup and Scale-up strategy, so that higher-risk projects and innovative companies in strategic sectors are supported. There, the role of the EIF is critical and should be further enhanced. Defence is now among our main priorities. In this regard, we welcome the decision by the EIB earlier this year to adapt its exclusion policy to go beyond dual use and allow the financing of projects dedicated to military use. We also welcome the inclusion of defence and security as a public policy goal. I encourage the EIB to continue working on strengthening the project pipeline in 2025. I cannot comment today on the upcoming MFF proposal, but I can assure you all that the EIB Group will remain a key partner in implementing EU programmes and delivering EU policies on the ground. I also encourage the EIB to use their own balance sheet to invest into more high-risk, high-reward projects for increased EU added value. Secondly, let me recall that competitiveness is closely linked to simplification and the effective disbursement of funds into the real economy. In this context, the Commission has set out its ambitious simplification agenda and is committed to fully implementing it. The omnibus proposals already presented by the Commission include important provisions that aim not only to simplify, but also to make the best use of existing investment programmes in as cost-effective a manner as possible. One of such examples is Omnibus on InvestEU. The measures included in that proposal will simplify the lives of beneficiaries and implementing partners, thereby enhancing the effectiveness of InvestEU. I am glad to see that the European Parliament welcomed this proposal. We hope that the negotiations will proceed swiftly to adopt the necessary changes and unlock the needed resources. Third, I would like to mention the strategic role of EIB Global, which is expected to strengthen the EU's strategic interests around the world in terms of economic security, trade and local industrial resilience. The EIB's efforts to develop this strategic procurement has great potential to achieve alignment between our investments and our interests and values. Continuing to provide critical support to Ukraine will remain a top priority, and the EIB is an important ally and partner in this regard. Here, recent EIB operations to provide a pan-European guarantee for EU companies trading with Ukraine is a positive step. Again, I welcome the European Parliament report that brings important insights and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I will remind you that the Vice President of the EIB is not here. He will arrive in 15 minutes and we will continue with the debate. Now it's the turn for Mr. Streicht for 1 minute on behalf of the Committee on Budget.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. I'd like to thank the rapporteur for his report. The European Investment Bank is a key instrument for implementing Europe's objectives. The AAA rating is the basis for cheap, long-term financing, and it must remain in place. I support the strategic roadmap with the focus on competitiveness and security. But for the future, we need to ensure that this is economically feasible, risk-aware, and with sufficient capital reserves. When it comes to risk capital, there need to be clear criteria and verifiable effect. I think Northvolt can show up the dangers of politically motivated investments. I think we need to have a look at a committee of inquiry, particularly as regards the activities of the German Minister of the Environment, Mr. Habeck, in the previous government. Economic concerns have to stand in the centre ground, and access to the resources of the EIB has to be ensured for small and medium-sized companies and disadvantaged regions. But it has to be done effectively and with accountability.
Thank you very much. Now it's the turn of the political groups. And first of all, we will have the floor for Mrs. Quelag for 2 minutes in behalf of the EPP group.
Thank you, Chair.
It might sound a bit hackneyed to say that Europe is facing historical challenges, but at the same time, it's a fact. The aggression by Russia has demonstrated that we need a defence capacity that is also serving as a deterrence. And then we've got the tariff war, which has pointed towards our economic dependency and weaknesses. These are two threats, and to some extent, the answer to these threats is increased investments. The EIB is the Union's bank, and it really needs to play a primary role in this regard, because the bank is there as the most appropriate stakeholder that can mobilise private equity and apply the logic of the market. But without private equity, we cannot meet the challenges that I just mentioned. Having said that, we shouldn't be neglecting either the investments necessary in our EU member states in order to put them on an equal footing. There are poorer states in the EU, and they have far less access to infrastructure, investing into healthcare or indeed education, and that is precisely what we need in order to allow those states to catch up. Unfortunately, I have to say to this House that long-term investments have been neglected, and in Hungary it's been a deliberate policy over the last 15 years. János Lázár, who is the Hungarian minister responsible for construction and transport, not only put a halt to a whole bunch of investments, in addition to that, he tells a barefaced lie saying that it's the opposition that is sabotaging access to EIB loans. I'm actually asking for the very opposite from the EIB. Please invest more intensively into Hungary. Please do more. And indeed, if I may turn to the bank and to the European Commission, I would ask you to find ways of means of making sure that the union resources which are blocked right now, that they can actually be conveyed to Hungarian projects through the bank. The EIB could exert control, but could also act against corruption by dealing with public procurement actively. In addition to which, I would ask the bank to make sure that resources are made available to small regions, cities. That would allow us to carry out renovation works in our schools, in our social institutions, and in our rental housing market. By the way, on the subject of rental housing, I welcome the fact that in this EIB report, we mention in particular the role of the bank in this question of the housing crisis. So it's quite clear that the European citizens expect the EIB to do good work and successful work in this respect.
I give the floor to Mrs. Tavares for 1 minute on behalf of S&D Group.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner Albuquerque. There are a lot of uncertainties and challenges, pressures on national budgets. The EIB is playing an ever more vital role in the EU's strategic autonomy, particularly in the post-2027 budget environment. Green lights were given to future strategies recently so that we can further strengthen the credibility of this institution with investors. We need to keep the AAA rating and keep that credibility. But we also need to move forward for middle classes, for young people, support for Ukraine, global gateway projects, the double transition, climate bank, more investment in digital competitiveness, helping startups and SMEs for internal growth, and stopping a brain drain away from the EU. We also see the need for more investment in defence. But we also need to ensure that as we look at the future challenges that the EU will face, we very much need a strong forward-facing EIB.
Now is the turn for Mrs. Győri for 1 minute and a half on behalf of Patriots Group.
Thank you very much, honourable members of the European Parliament. We've said this time and time again. Brussels is pursuing an economic policy which is based on ideology, and as a result of that, there's lower productivity, less innovation, energy prices are rising. According to the IMF, the US economy is growing 3 times more quickly than ours. Since the Draghi report, in addition, we know that we are short of resources. It's a very negative story, but the EIB plays a positive role within this context because, unlike the Commission, it makes rational decisions when it comes to investments and it focuses on SMEs. The Budapest Declaration calls for an increased role for the EIB. I support that. I also support a simplification of access to EIB loans, and we need to increase the loan guarantees offered by the EIB. The bank needs to maintain its excellent credit rating. That's the only way of making sure that it can lend at a low cost and continue to do so. So in the past, we need this in terms of economic rationality. The bank should be playing its role in terms of defence industry investments, nuclear energy development, and it should be helping out the member states to help them meet their development targets in the longer term. So I would say yes to the bank's activities. However, I shall say no to the Parliament report on this matter. I would be saying this to the EIB representative if they were here, but I just want to guard you against something. Please do not yield to the pressure exerted by my comrades or colleagues in the House from the left. Unfortunately, even in this report, we can feel that pressure. They talk about conditionality in terms of investments. They talk about a human rights code of conduct, and they even talk about maybe, teaching or lecturing third countries in this regard when it comes to democracy. Well, quite frankly, thank you, but no thank you. This is